Hello, very special viewers, listeners, and game developer enthusiasts. I'm the Purple Sharpie, and I'm here with a few of the staff from the brand new game, Enchanted. I have Paulina, Phoebe, and Minna here today. How are you all doing?
Yeah, good. Thanks for having us.
Good. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you so much for asking. Now, everyone, I understand there's a new project on the horizon from us. Paulina, can you please tell us a little bit more about it?
Sure. So we're making a game called Enchanted, which is a cooperative adventure game where you discover magical potions and brew them and serve magical creatures, fight off friend monsters, and essentially just gather your party and journey on a quest to overcome an evil wizard landlord.
Ooh, well, that sounds exciting. Why don't we go ahead and run the trailer really quick?
Peggy 3.
Hi there. I am one of the delicious potions you can find in Innchanted. Here's Taram pouring me from the dispenser. Well, there's work to do and customers await. There's Ronnie. She's amazing. She's taking me for a bath in the cauldron where I will become a new kind of potion. Hey, a customer here is waiting for their steak. Ah, this is Florian. He just kind of does that. He's strong as a bear. And here I go again. My destiny awaits me, and here comes Celsius to take me away. Celsius is awesome, as they always keep their cool. But wait, what the? The furniture is moving. Whoa!
Hi!
Enchanted, a fast-paced co-op and multiplayer game to play with your friends and family. Manage your inn and serve your customers in an amazing world full of spirits, cute animals, adventurers, and an evil wizard. Enchanted, coming soon.
Alrighty, so after this amazing trailer, I have questions. And Paulina, I think you're one of the only people that can give me some of these answers. So talk to me, because it's very clear that this wizard is out here making our main characters' lives a little bit harder than it need be.
What? An evil wizard do that? No. Yeah, Colin is, I guess, this wizard that rocked up from another land and decided to take over this family inn. What an unusual thing to do. What villainy.
So I'd also really appreciate it if you explained a little bit more regarding the character makeup, because I understand there are a multitude of characters that you get to choose from as well, and they each have special powers.
Yeah, sure. So all the characters are actually like kind of aspiring adventurers who are studying to become adventurers, and so they've met together and they're friends and they're part of the party, but they've actually come from different places all over the place. I'll let Phoebe talk about Taram, who's kind of like from this land and is I guess one of the main characters. And there's Rani, who's kind of like got Indian inspirations, like Indian princess inspirations. And there's Celsius, who is this kind of Persian-esque knight that, you know, is kind of interesting, but very, very like very lovely and entertaining. Florian is a druid from a faraway northern land. Yeah, it's a lot of fun characters to play with.
That's a crazy clan to talk about. And speaking of this ridiculous, concocted, amazing friendship group, I'd love to hear your input here, Phoebe, because similar to what Paulina just said there, the main character was given inspiration from indigenous stories. Can you talk to me a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so I came on board and Paulina really wanted an Indigenous character to be part of this game. So I started working on Taram, and she was a lot of fun to kind of put together, you know, when a lot of people say that you put a little bit of yourself in your craft, so that's definitely an instance with Taram. I looked to not just myself though for inspiration for her appearance. I wanted her to be very like headstrong female, but very like typical Indigenous features, because as a kid I grew up kind of being ashamed of those features maybe and wanting to like. I have naturally curly hair, so I straightened my hair for ease and like for fashion. So I wanted her to be really proud. So I looked at myself, I looked at my cousins and family, and these strong Indigenous traits, like these beautiful brown eyes and like beautiful curly hair. So that's a little bit about what went into, kind of her makeup.
Now, I know she wasn't the only one derived of a lot of Indigenous culture for inspiration. I happen to note that there were several different aspects of the game that seem to also seem to take inspiration from Indigenous cultures. Specifically, things like the constellation that we see during the night cycle inside of the inn. We see different types of constellations back there that seem to have Indigenous origins. Can you talk to us a little bit more about that?
Yes, those constellations actually in our game, correct me if I'm wrong, Polina, but those are just fun little constellations. There are Indigenous clans with stories about specific constellations in the sky all over Australia. But I just want to preface that, Australia has thousands and thousands of Indigenous clans across the entire country, and they all have completely different stories for like the same world events. For instance, in some cultures or some clans, the sun is represented as man, whilst others it's a woman. So actually a lot of our stories are completely different, and that even like goes towards the language as well. Some groups who are even neighbouring one another have completely different languages. So for this game specifically, we focused a lot around, my cultural background. So the Yarraguddidj clan from the Mar Nation in Southwest Victoria. So that's where all of our Indigenous inspiration came from.
And I guess it's probably worth noting that I forgot to mention at the start, all those things that you see are because it's set in a pre-colonial, alternate history kind of imagined reality, in Australia. So that's what's referencing.
Is that also why we see the background seem to be more lush and kind of foresty?
Definitely. I'll let Phoebe go into it, but pre-colonial Australia looked very different to what happened, I guess, after colonization came and unfortunately destroyed all of the beautiful nature. I'll let Phoebe take that one.
Yeah, I know we worked really hard on what this land might look like, what structures there might be, and we took we did a lot of research into what the land, looked like and what Indigenous people did. There's a lot of misconceptions. They were just hunters and gatherers and they just went out and picked berries and hunted animals when they needed to, but it's actually incorrect. They were cultivators and they were growers, and they had a lot of work in like horticulture and like working on these crops to make it beneficial and feed everybody. So we did a lot of research into, those kind of ideas. So we, worked in, growing crops in the game to kind of represent, those things.
So speaking of traditional makeup, specifically pre-colonial time of Aboriginal and Indigenous culture, I want to actually go towards the music and to this. Minna, I'd actually like to speak to you a little bit regarding it, because I happen to know that a lot of the instrumentation inside of that time period typically were aerophones. We heard quite a bit of percussive instruments as well, meaning drums, specifically woodwind instruments, things that used air. Very, 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 very notably, obviously, the didgeridoo. Just duh, right? But inside of the actual soundtrack that we hear acoustic instruments that seem to be string in nature. Can you talk to me about that decision?
Of course. The decision on that, the primary decision of the soundtrack is to work with Indigenous musicians, because I'm not Indigenous myself. So what my role is really to bridge traditional Indigenous musicians and their practice with what's happening in the game. So we're working with three fantastic artists, Alara Briggs-Patterson on the double bass, Kiernan Ironfield on the didgeridoo, which is known traditionally as the yidaki, and Eric Avery on violin. Now, the only traditionally Australian instrument there is the yidaki, or the didgeridoo. But the way that Alara and Eric play their string instruments specifically is so imbued with their connection to heritage. And that's why in working with them, I would get them to record improvisations in response to the game in different keys, in different tempos. And I would kind of then jam with them, displaced in time. So any guitar you hear comes from me, and percussion is kind of like all based around their performances. And, you know, we go do a bit of editing, bit of mixing, bit of processing, in ways that I then show to them, and then they can record other takes on top of it in response to themselves and to what I've done. So it's basically a big jam session through different instruments.
Now, I really like that you did actually work with people that were very in tune with Native and Aboriginal culture, which is fantastic. I would like to talk a little bit more about some of the acoustic choices that we hear, because I completely understand what you mean by obviously having to edit a little bit. Who doesn't? Am I right? But talk to me a little bit more why you opted to use these acoustic instruments as opposed to their electric counterparts inside of the song choice. Does it also go back to wanting to be true to the tone and the emotional aspect of the game?
To an extent, the big driving force behind that is really Paulina asking me to make sure this whole thing is kind of feels like it comes out of this place, and that it does feel very natural, very kind of the earth, and a lot of wood. You know, like you get violin, you get yidaki, which is literally sometimes carved out of a tree. In fact, one of the instruments we recorded pretty much maintains the shape of its original tree. It's quite amazing. And then you got violin. So the guitar really kind of just fits into that world for my part. It's a guitar and a ukulele, which is kind of like that mix between a guitar and a ukulele. And the percussion as well all comes from that point of view. Anything kind of ethereal or supernatural, for lack of a better term, comes from processing those sounds in electronic ways, but not actually electronic sources. So it really is just to keep kind of like, to be part of this world and fit in naturally and still be magical.
I did really enjoy the music choices inside of the game. I felt like they all moved together very well. Talk to me about the options that you had there and how you wanted all of the songs to kind of flow into each other in the middle of specifically transitional movement.
Well, there's a bit with going into the evening activities where you see those constellations, and that just, the minute I saw the artwork, I was like, I just sat down and improvised something, and literally what you hear in the game is me improvising on guitar based on what I saw in the constellations. And this is still all in progress, so in terms of incorporating other instruments, it's all based on the same keys that we improvised and recorded in, which means that if I were then to bring in any of these performances, they would fit in without issue. So a lot of it is really based on making sure that all the keys are compatible with each other, and that the instruments that you hear in one place in the game can occur again in another place in the game. It's just keeping the sonic world kind of very consistent, but still with a lot of variety.
I like that. I'd like to actually move along and kind of switch gears in this. And I want to go to you, Paulina, specifically, because one of the things I felt inside of the game was that I could just pick it up and play it regardless of what other games I had played before. It seemed very, what's the word I'm looking for? Accessible. Accessible for sure. First of all, I want to talk about your option and your choice to make it a controller-based or keyboard-based game.
So it's an interesting thing. I've been playing games since I was a child, but I felt like, what is the point of a game if I can't play with whoever I want to play it with? So we really tried to make this game accessible to as many people as we could. And particularly, I wanted to let people have that beautiful moment where they play with their parents or their family, and kids playing with their parents or partners or flatmates. Like, it's those emotional connections that you have in that experience, which is why we wanted to make this game in the first place. So it wouldn't have been, I guess, meaningful if people found it difficult. So yeah, we wanted to try and let people play the way they want, with a controller, keyboard, adaptive controller, a banana, I don't know. Like, we want to try and make it accessible.
So inside of the game, obviously co-op is a huge feature, but we also see the 2-button system allowing for very easy playability from any player. Was that also an aspect of the accessibility that you specifically put inside the game?
Most definitely. I think there might be slightly more than 2 buttons, but we tried to make it like 2 buttons are like the only minimum requirement, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Definitely, we're definitely conscious of, mobility and I guess difficulty, even like visually. We're trying not to make it too overwhelming, and we're trying to make it colorblind friendly. And I guess, yeah, it's that thing of we'd like people to play it and not to feel like they can't for whatever reason.
So there are a couple of other features specifically that I noticed inside of the game, the first of which is actually the customer feedback system, which basically still allows you to feel towards the points that you receive inside of the round, but also don't kind of like press you into feeling bad about your performance that round as well. Was that system a way to make players both feel rewarded and incentivize them to play well as more, basically, without punishing them or anything for the way they performed at that specific level?
Most definitely. I feel like the world is already too hard. When I want to relax on my terms. So the idea behind it is that definitely, if you'd like to play this game in hardcore mode, the game will notice that you're doing that and give you a challenge, and it will adjust it in real time. If you would like to chill and relax, the game will just let you have a good time. It's no gatekeeping. If you don't want to play it again and you want to just continue on without having to like master it or get 4 stars or whatever, you can play the way you want to play. And I think that's the way games should be.
Talk to me about
and if I could add to that,
sorry. Yeah, of course.
If I could add to that, that's one of the main things that goes into the music as well. Because if you're constantly hearing something and it's stressing you out, Paulina's like, no, this is too stressful. It needs to be more chill for people to relax.
And I guess that's about like neurodiversity accessibility for me, because I find things really, really accosting visually or overwhelming through sound. And so I want people to let them take the experience they want. And if they want it to be more chill, that's what they're going to get.
Now, inside of games like this, specifically, I like to call them like simulation-y games, you give the player a lot to think about, especially when they're kind of stressed with like a time challenge, right? Now, you already talked about the way that you made it more accessible through customer feedback. Could you talk about the different ways that you make it so that the player isn't overwhelmed while they're playing, and basically how they're able to set up their mental stack so they don't feel like there's a huge stress on them in the middle of these rounds?
So, as I said, there's no minimum requirement to pass a level. So players can really just focus on the thing that gives them the most joy, and that's all they need to do. However, we thought we'd try and make it more helpful. So there's also a companion AI that you can summon, and you can go tell it, oh, I need you to go sort out the potions. And I guess I just feel like, let's reduce the emotional labor. So we tried to make this companion really quite intelligent so that it will go and just sort that out for you, and you don't need to micromanage it or handle it. And you can just do the thing that you'd like to do. In terms of mental stack, I guess we definitely did try and we iterated a lot on making the flow a bit like relaxing and not demanding. It's like we're trying to achieve a flow state. And so all of that, I guess, decision-making orders is around how do we make this, create that ease for the player.
No, I really did appreciate it because a lot of the placement inside of the end does allow the player to not have to pick and choose between what they want to do. In addition to the companionship AI, really does allow the player to ease up even more on their mental stack by providing obvious additional options to something they may not feel as strong in when they're playing. And I loved those features when I play. I just have to gush about that even more yet again. It was so enjoyable to just be able to relax and play and get back at that evil capitalistic wizard, Like it felt really good. I was like, not this end, colonizer. It was good. It was nice. All right, so we're getting close to the end of the interview, and by getting close, I mean we finally arrived. Paulina, can you tell us more about where we can find information regarding the project?
Sure. So I guess firstly, you can wishlist it on Steam. Obviously, it's Enchanted with 2 N's. But there's also like a mailing list you can subscribe to on our website, enchanted.com. The things I guess where we post the most is on Twitter, and Facebook. So if you want to check out Enchanted on Facebook and Twitter, we're there too.
Paulina, Phoebe, Minna, thank you so much for your time today. And what a fantastic game that was. Honestly, one of my favorite experiences this year.
Thank you so
you.
much.
Thanks for
That's
having
aw.
us, Sharpie.
It's very
They
touching.
didn't know I was going to say that. I didn't say that in the pre-interview. I got it with that one. Thank you again, everybody. All right,
Thank you
that's
so
going to
much.
do it for this interview. But everyone stay tuned. We have even more this Game Devs of Color Expo 2021.